A very good morning, very good afternoon, and a very good evening, wherever you are watching this live broadcast from. Welcome. My name is Nishit Kotak. I am here with the team from Hindu Academy. If you are new to the broadcast, let me just briefly explain the format. We run from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock every Saturday, UK time. And we initially start off with a focus topic. The whole broadcast is based around questions and answers to do with the topic of Hinduism. So feel free to share the broadcast with your friends and family. And two, if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook, then feel free to ask whatever questions you'd like to ask about Hinduism into the comments area. We will attempt to pick it up and answer you live. So for today, we have a focus topic which is based around vegetarianism. So the question is, when did vegetarianism start in Hinduism? To explore this, I'm going to share a video with you, and I will be back just after the video finishes. It's a short clip, just over 4 minutes. Here we go.
Okay, first let's be very clear. People somehow feel that unless you're vegetarian, you can't be Hindu. This is not true. Let me tell you, actually there was research done by a major newspaper in India about a few years back to see how many Hindus are vegetarian in India. Forget about UK. In India, they did research. And they went to all the different states and interviewed so many people, do the surveys, whatever way. And they found, when I saw it, I was like, oh dear. 60 or sometimes 70% of people in India, Hindus in India I should say, either eat meat, fish, seafood or eggs. 60 to 70% of Hindus in India. If you are a Bengali, you can't live without fish. So you see, let's be very clear, the Hindu tradition has never imposed vegetarianism. The Jaina tradition, are there any Jains here by the way? The Jain tradition has been vegetarian. It's because of the Jain influence, many Gujaratis have become vegetarian. Because of the Jains, they are the culprits. They will be going to McDonald's every day. So the Jain tradition brought in the idea of vegetarian because they said, look, life is sacred. And what's the background to this? Beautiful background. In fact, Jainism is ahead of its time. He said, look, all life is sacred. What a wonderful idea. He said, okay, if you need to survive and live on living things, then live on the least evolved living things, plants maybe. But don't live on the most highly evolved things which are very close for comfort. Don't live off them or kill them. This is the idea. And the stone Jains will not even eat green plants, you know that? Only dead leaves. I mean, I can't live like that. But this is how severe they are. Don't underestimate. They are saying, just as the Hindus are stickler for the idea of, say, Satya, they are stickler for the idea of ahimsa, non-violence. It's a central feature. No God. Just be ahimsa will take you to the highest level. This is Jainism. So it is very much a Jain influence that many Hindus are vegetarian like me today. Now what is the situation now? As I said, the Vedic scriptures basically simply said, revere all life, including the plant life. So if I'm saying I'm such a lovely chap, I eat just tomatoes and carrots, and they say, oh no, still living things, you're munching somebody's baby there. So see, we are in trouble straight away. So we are aware of it. We are simply saying we are cursed, if I can use the right word, to live on other living things. So best thing is to live on the least evolved rather than the most evolved living things. That's one thing. Second thing, this is again very interesting. Modern sciences are now suggesting strongly, good evidence, that vegetarianism is good for your health. So it has got health benefits. Now it's becoming visible. Until now it was hidden away, becoming visible. The most important reason why people should be vegetarian is this. And I go to many English girls' schools and I ask them, how many vegetarian? Boys are all mature, they eat anything that comes in around. But the girls are very sensitive. Many girls that I come across in English girls' schools say we are vegetarian. I say, why? They say, we hate the idea of cruelty to animals. When we see these animals herded for human consumption, the way they are treated, the way they are killed and murdered and butchered, and then you have to eat that. We told our mummies, no more meat, mommy. I say, I love this. See, this is how it should be heartfelt, something that you feel and you want to give up. That's the natural way of being vegetarian rather than being imposed by religion. So this is the position of the Hindus regarding vegetarianism.
Free e-learning course in Hinduism. To register, please visit www.hindu-academy.com.
Talks on Hinduism. Sponsored by People Care. Encouraging caring for the elderly in their own homes. For more information, please visit peoplecare.com.
So there we have it, a really interesting topic to explore. And to get us going on this topic, I'd like to invite Manish Bhai. So today we've got a full panel again here. Manish Bhai, welcome back. And I invite you to take this conversation further.
Thank you, Nishit Bhai. It's good to be back with the panels and very interesting topic today, vegetarianism and how it started and the Jain influence. One thing Jai Bhai mentioned is we are cursed to live on other living things. And if we see the whole food chain or the food cycle, we see animals, killing animals, and it's like a whole cycle of killing happening, and everybody gets fed in that way. And then we come up with this vegetarian idea where we are eating plants and vegetables. Are we being more humane or more, I think, less violent by being vegetarian? Sitavin?
Sorry. Yes, this is the thing. We are unfortunately cursed to live off other living things. Even our mere existence means that lots of other small organisms that we're breathing in all the time get killed. So we're literally taking up whole other life space by having our own life, and there's nothing that we can do about it. We weren't sort of given a choice that, do you want to live or do you want to give that space to somebody else? So it's very sort of difficult situation that we are all in. But what Hinduism does is it provides a sort of a scale. So you have, the less evolved beings like, sort of insects and plants and that kind of thing. And then it becomes more and more complex until you come up to the human, the human body, which is one of the most complex. So it's a very, very difficult situation because every aspect of our life involves stepping on other life, even the simple act of breathing. So we have to then say, okay, then how can we avoid being the most sort of violent in a way? And the way that we can do that is by sort of choosing to not eat animals, for example, but by choosing to eat lower, items which are lower down the scale, such as plants. And, we can live off that. I mean, if we could live off chemicals, then even better, I guess, because that means involves stepping on even less life. So yeah, it's a very, very difficult situation. It's the unfortunate sort of complexity of life that we have to tread on other life for our own survival. And it doesn't even have to relate to diet. So say, for example, you have an infection, and Dad always used this example, suppose you've got an infection in your chest or whatever. It doesn't mean, I let those bacteria have fun and have party in my lungs. You have to make sure you take the antibiotics and get better, otherwise your life is gone. So it's one of those things that our life involves treading on other life, and we just have to try and make the most sort of ethical decisions that we can. And there's nothing much more we can do about it. Vijay Bhai?
Yeah, I think Sita, you pretty much covered it. The key thing is, as Manish Bhai asked, I mean, does it make somebody better if he's vegetarian? Not necessarily, because although it's, as Sita mentioned, it's always better to eat a lower plant in lower life forms and higher life forms. But quite often there are very many factors which decide what we eat. One of them is geographical. I mean, as Jai Bhai mentioned, Bengalis eat fish. I mean, they live on an estuary, I mean, there's a whole delta, so many rivers, and it's just rice and fish. And by the way, India has a huge coastline. So it's not surprising a lot of people in India actually eat fish. So quite often these different circumstances decide what you eat. And you have to be very careful not to judge, people on that basis. Recently, when I went to India, well, not recently, before COVID actually, almost 2 years ago, I asked farmers, and a lot of farmers use a lot of pesticides to feed the green, beans and rice and wheat to us. And a lot of organisms are killed there because they won't have a good harvest to feed the human population. So the way life has evolved, through evolution, is such a complex dynamic that quite often we have to step on life to survive and to feed, humanity. So a lot of big issues. I think the one thing I would say is the word ethics comes into play. How do we make everything more ethical? Try and kill less life, eat more, ethically grown plants with less environmental damage. I mean, by and large, today we know that when people eat fish, the oceans have all been drained out totally. There's nothing left for actually, the food cycle in the sea. The whales and dolphins, they don't have enough. They're going to go large distances to get food now because we got these huge trawlers draining fish. So by and large, I think the issue is this, that how do we make it sustainable and ethics? And I remember my neighbor, she's passed away now, she was saying that when they were young in UK, they only had meat or, fish. But fish maybe every week, once a week, or meat once every 2 weeks. They're living on soup, suede soup or whatever, cabbage soup. So I think as of now, because of the intense consumption of meat, there's so many issues we have, land destruction, overgrazing, all kinds of issues. So I think humanity as a whole has to try and solve this problem. And I think one way is becoming vegetarian is one way of doing that, because I believe that at least in America, huge amount of grain is grown to feed livestock. So something that, the feed that can feed 10 people is reduced to 1 kilo of meat, right? Same amount. So of course, plants in many ways, in ethical terms, in terms of feeding the world, is a much better way to do it. But as I said, we should never judge somebody on what he eats because we don't know his circumstances, we don't know his upbringing, we don't know his geographical location. I mean, if I go and tell the Sami people of the north, northern and the Arctic, or start eating mango, it would work, right? They don't have that. So they will eat a reindeer or whatever they eat. So I think we have to be careful and not say that somebody who's not a vegetarian is a bad person. It doesn't work like that. Yeah, there are a lot of dynamics in play.
So that's great stuff there, Vijay Bhai. You covered many interesting topics there. One of them is this environmental concerns, the meat industry is big sort of influence on that. And would vegetarianism help with this environmental issue, as you are saying? Is there, elaborate more on that?
Absolutely. I mean, I'll give you an example. This is a while back, a few years ago, Australia used to export a lot of sheep, sheep, animal lambs, to the Middle East for religious functions. And then all of a sudden, the groundwater went dry, and even the rivers were going dry. And then actually one clever parliament, mentioned in the parliament that, by the way, Australia is one of the biggest exporter of water, despite being a drought country. They're exporting water through sheep, because it costs a lot of money, a lot of resources to raise animals. I mean, that's why in the olden days, people raise animals are very careful. They only ate meat very rarely because they knew it takes a while. So now they've stopped that. They now have the waters are replenishing again, and they actually now can grow crops like wheat. I mean, one of the biggest exports now, you'll be surprised, is mung beans. So they've gone the other way now, saying that let's the same world produce far more amount of food. We grow a lot more food, you see, because the same amount of water resources. So by the way, also the same in the Amazon. I mean, forests are being cleared every day. I think about 12 football fields are being, or 50 football fields are cleared every day. I mean, this is a forest with 400 billion trees, and they're disappearing quite fast. Why? Because of the insatiable appetite for meat. In sharp fast food restaurants, in many places, and there's been tremendous damage to the environment. Don't forget, when you clear a forest, there is less space for monkeys, less space for birds. You name it, everything loses out. So again, the thing is, there are very many good ethical reasons where going towards vegetarianism, and some would say even veganism, are very strong arguments. It doesn't mean we are saying that tomorrow everybody should become vegetarian. But by and large, if you think ethically, then going towards a vegetarian diet or a vegan diet has got far more benefit. I think the main thing about the vegetarian diet is the idea of dairy and eggs, which is produced commercially, and that's a big issue some people have. But of course, there's a lot of benefit, in terms of going to vegetarian in terms of environment. There are some negative effects as well. Like, when people start drinking almond milk. So now we have a lot of almond farms everywhere, yes, and taking away space for some bees and in the forest. So there are some issues there as well. So I think we need to think and be a bit clever on how to tackle this issue about, environment. Sitaben?
Yeah, I think you've covered it amazingly. So, I mean, that's the thing is, especially, if you're growing or sort of breeding lots of cattle and the food, the animals that humans consume, then you're really disrupting the whole ecological balance, the whole ecological cycle. And, nature always operates on a very cyclical basis. So what is waste for one animal is food for another animal. And it very, very organic, very, very natural. There's nothing that goes to waste. But the way that humanity operates, it's on a very sort of linear sort of system. So, we have our washing machine and then we just throw it out into the environment. It doesn't get reused again. So because of that, we're creating a huge amount of waste, a huge amount of disruption to the whole ecology. And we need to sort of go back to, there's this whole Gaia hypothesis where, we see the whole Earth as a living organism in itself, and it's made up of a whole complexity of other living organisms. And it's such a fine balance that nature has got, and humanity is coming and sort of disrupting it all. I mean, ancient man, it was a different time, but now we've got all this sort of industrial revolution and all these sort of things which have taken place in the last few hundred years, which are really causing a huge amount of damage to the planet. And we need to go back to this sort of more cyclical approach that nature has shown us for so many thousands of years, that whatever waste that we produce, try and find a way to reuse it again. And, people are cottoning onto that now. So reusing and recycling anything and everything we can help us sort of emulate this whole natural cyclical way that the world operates on such a beautiful, fine balance. And we've got a lot of work to do. And it does, you do get people who have this sort of anxiety about the environment and what they can do, because it feels so incredibly overwhelming that I'm just one tiny little person on this planet with billions of people and organisms. How am I going to make a difference? But we have to do what little we can, and if everyone thinks in that way, then we will be able to sort of resolve the whole sort of environmental issue. And that's all that we can do. And humanity is very resourceful, very clever. So, I mean, I personally do have faith in humanity that we'll be able to come out of this. And we are sort of awakening at the right sort of time, I hope, hopefully not too late.
That's wonderful to hear, Vijay Bhai, Sitaben. We've got wonderful to hear about recycling and how it can help. We got this wonderful idea of ahimsa that we got influence from Jainism, as Jay Bhai was saying. And ahimsa is a non-killing and non-injury to other living things. Does ahimsa help to take you to higher level in spiritual terms? And are Hindus forbidden to eat meat because of this ahimsa sort of ideas, Sitaben?
I mean, obviously, ahimsa is a beautiful idea, saying that we should show reverence for all life, regardless. But life is incredibly complicated, as Vijay Bhai said. Suppose that your resources, your food is only meat. How can you then go around preaching that to that person, don't eat meat, they'll starve and die? So it's an incredibly sort of complex issue. It's very, very easy to sort of whitewash it and say, oh, ahimsa, ahimsa. And it is a beautiful idea, but we have to practice it in the way that allows us to survive and allows the whole rest of the environment to survive in as least harmful a way as possible. So showing respect for all life is incredibly important, and we have choices, in the modern world. So, trying to, as Vijay Bhai said, choosing ethically sourced products, avoiding products which have, caused any kind of cruelty to animals is wonderful. And it's not just restricted to food, it's restricted to clothing, for example, leather and animal products used in, all the sort of fashion industry, the cosmetic industry. It's in every sort of aspect of our life. And we have to also get away from this sort of throwaway culture that we have. I mean, because plastics and plastic bags are just sort of They're everywhere, absolutely everywhere. I think they're even able to find microplastics at the top of the highest mountains, at the depths of the ocean. I think we've even probably got microplastics in our bodies, which is a really, really frightening thought, because we just have this throwaway culture, and we just say, oh, we just bin it, and then nobody sees it, but then the whole world just gets consumed by rubbish, and it's really, really frightening. So these wonderful ancient ideas of ahimsa, showing reverence for life, don't just throw your bag out onto the grass, put it properly, all of these little things that we can do which can hopefully make a difference. But it is an incredibly worrying situation, and these ancient ideas, if we can sort of bring them back into the fore, they can help people sort of get a bit more perspective on life. Vijay bhai?
I think Sita, you got some wonderful points there. I mean, just to add, as Sita mentioned, that we may claim that, oh, ahimsa means I'm a vegetarian, I'm a vegan, I practice ahimsa. No, you don't, because I'll tell you why. Sita mentioned, the day you throw a plastic bag in the sea and some fish swallows and dies, that is not ahimsa. So it's not just saying, oh, because I don't eat meat, I'm safe, I'm okay. No, it's not like that. Responsibility is much bigger. And there are a lot of ethical issues here, right? So by and large, changing our lifestyles, on how to live ethically is in many ways far more important. I mean, I know in India it happens a lot. Actually, even in Kenya, when I used to grow up there, it's quite many years back now. And one of the cows that my father used to keep a lot of cows on the farm, he loved this hobby. He would actually measure daily butter corner of every cow, and he did this lovely hobby. But there was once we had a cow actually swallowed industrial plastic. And when it passed away, we opened them and it's just plastic continuously. So the question comes, by careless throwing a bag and some animal consumes it and kind of dies, is that ahimsa? Of course not. So it's far more bigger issue than that. And I think also the other point is this, that ahimsa is good, okay, no doubt, try and show reverence to animals, which is good. But always keep in mind that not everybody has a luxury of having the idea of plants all the time. Okay, nowadays, because of, commercial reasons and exporting of food is a bit different now, but India has been immensely lucky. People forget that half of India is arable land. You'll be surprised, China is 3 times bigger than India, but only 10% is arable. And even in Europe, only recently, because of better seeds, more resistant prone seeds, more climate prone seeds of plants, that actually food grows in abundance here. It wasn't the case at one time. So I think depending on where you are as well, it depends. Kind of impacts your food habits. But of course, by and large, we should try as much as possible to become vegetarian or even vegan. That should be an aspiration, but we shouldn't judge somebody just because they're not. Yeah, Manish bhai.
That's wonderful to hear, Vijay bhai. So some people pro meat eating, they would say our Vedas contain animal sacrifices, and Hindus have been eating meat, and as Jai bhai was mentioning, that the survey mentioned 60 to 70% of Hindus eat meat. Is there anything wrong in that? And should we continue with animal sacrifice as well if done? What is your view on that, Vijay bhai?
Very interesting question. I mean, I've had debates with a lot of monks as well on this issue. Personally, I believe, as my understanding, there is sacrifice in the Vedas. But what it does do, I must say that when you have a special ceremony, because if you look at the Vedic scriptures, to sacrifice an animal is a very big thing. They do a special ceremony, they do whatever. So in effect, by making it a process where it's required a ceremony, it actually reduces the consumption. You just go on killing animal as you feel like. You put a big elaborate process in place to show that that's a very big thing you're doing. And in that sense, kind of limits the amount of animals you kill. But it has been there. I mean, one thing else to mention, very interesting. I know people sometimes don't get this, but when my grandfather was growing up in India, this is something that I've heard firsthand, that he was a farmer, by the way. And every third year, he would get a crop, because one year, you get locust attack, no crop. Next year, drought, no crop. So as a farmer, he was struggling to feed himself. Forget somebody else who's not a farmer. So you can imagine the Harijans, other people who are not actually farmers. And my grandfather would hide grain because it was hard, that time to grow. So what about other people who don't even have the resource, of farming? What do you do? So I think to say that we've been vegetarian forever and ever is actually not true. People have to survive, right? Nowadays, of course, things are much better because of science, technology. We can grow loads of grain and we can live. But the thing is that all I would suggest is that by and large, as Sita mentioned earlier, we should try and aspire to eat foods which are less evolved like plants as much as possible. When someone's eating meat, then we should not vilify him as such. I know some people love their meat. I hear that a lot from people. I love my meat. I can't give it up. But I think by and large, as Sita says, we have faith in humanity. They're actually evolving. Nowadays, no matter where you go, I mean, my children are all vegan. I'm vegan for 5-6 years now. My wife is vegan. It's getting better and better. No matter where you go, you get vegan burgers, vegan this, vegan ice cream. So vegan is everywhere now. So it's actually not even a problem anymore. The things have evolved. But of course, the issue still comes. Like when I drink almond milk, for example, I know that almond production increased by about 10-fold, which means that some environment has been destroyed to grow these almond fields. Apparently, the biggest animal which suffer from the almond fields is the bee. You'll be surprised. The bees, right? When they grow commercially, almond plants are grown commercially. They are the pesticides to grow, have a better crop. So even then, you have to be careful. Even if you're vegan, it's not that straightforward. So it's such a complex thing. But by and large, if you say ethical, look, I'll have ethical foods and try and work out what is ethically sourced in a nice way, then you can move forward. But just by saying that people are eating meat should not eat meat, it's not that straightforward. It doesn't mean if you just stop eating meat, the environment will be better off. There are other things as well which are not right as well, So it's a very, very complex discussion. Sita, man.
Yeah, no, I think you've covered it amazingly, but I think you're right that humanity is evolving, and at the moment, a lot of humanity says, we can't live without meat. It's our main sort of food that we eat, and you can't sort of stop them. We're not a communist state, so you have to let them do what they want to. But I think the human mind continues to evolve over the ages, and we may look back in 300-400 years and we say, oh my God, can you believe that people actually used to eat meat? What a horrible, horrific thing that was. So maybe humanity will evolve in 300-400 years, or however long it is, and we'll all be so used to eating vegan-based food, vegetarian-based food, and that's how humanity evolves. I mean, in the ancient times, we had absolutely no choice when we were hunter-gatherers. We had to live off meat, but it was a very, very different time, and time continues to evolve, and we just hope that humanity will eventually start sort of seeing that you can live very well on a vegan or a vegetarian diet. And I've seen, in countries like Mexico, you can actually eat insects. There's billions of insects around. Why don't people start having insects for protein? Because I've seen that, people can, have their protein source through insects, and there's billions of them around. I'm sure they won't, it won't really disrupt the ecosystem too much, but that's just I'm just thinking out loud.
Interesting thought there, Sita Ben. So some people think that because of this vegetarian influence, Hindus become mild-mannered and hence subject to violence from these other religious communities. What is your thought on that?
Oh, that's a tough question. Okay. I think one thing to say is that by and large, personally, my belief is that the reason why Hindus are not seen as aggressive, I think more than anything, is our dharma-based ideas, more than meat eating, I think. Because I've seen quite a few people who are vegetarian can be quite cruel and vicious sometimes. So there's no rule like that. But I think the Hindu ethos, the idea of not trying to show that only my way is right or the highway, we don't believe that. Yeah, my way or the highway is not how Hinduism works. So Hinduism, by and large, is very accommodating. I think that is what drives the idea of Hindus being liberal or saying, okay, look, let live and let live in that sense. We don't have an issue in that sense. Maybe that is perhaps the main reason, I think, more than meat eating. I know there are some people who say that meat makes you aggressive with tamasic. That may be true. I'm not saying it's not true. It may be true as well. But even people who are meat eaters, they by and large omnivores. They eat different kinds of foods as well. So I think more than anything is how the Hindu Dharma works and how it unfolds. That's why in India, from ancient times, people have always been free to believe what they want to believe and give the idea that everybody has a right to, their own pathway. And that is kind of the main basis, I think, in my view. See that, man?
Yeah, I mean, Hinduism and, Indian subcontinent has not really been known for going out there and being, attacking others or being violent or starting wars. So, we are generally seen as quite a peaceful sort of nation. And I think these wonderful ideas like ahimsa, which are sort of, so sort of integrated within the Indian mindset, they probably do have an influence, at least at a subconscious level, this idea that everything is sacred, everything is divine. I'm sure it has had a sort of an effect on the Indian mindset, on the Indian psyche for so many hundreds of thousands of years. And as Vijay Bhai said, this openness that we have, that, you can do what you like as long as you don't hurt or harm others, in the spiritual realm, in the, in the material realm, because we talk about dharma all the time. Dharma is righteous living. So you can go out there and fulfill your legitimate desires as long as you're not going out murdering people and killing people. So we've just been incredibly open. And I think it's sort of really reflected over the last thousands of years that we are not a violent community. And everywhere that the sort of Indian people have gone, diaspora all over the world, we're not seen as sort of cancerous or controversial. We just get on with it. And actually, we actually contribute a great deal to the economy. We sort of prosper and settle and do well. And we also, the part that often gets missed is we have a tremendous amount of spiritual inheritance, which we are not really showcasing as much as we should be. So hopefully the work of the Hindu Academy can go a long way to support people's spiritual development. It doesn't need to be Hinduism, but just their spiritual development. And it can go a long way in helping people in their lives.
That's wonderful to hear, Sita Ben. We take a question from Colin Moffat. It relates to most vegetarians, especially in West, because when you tell somebody, oh, I'm a vegetarian, there are a few questions flooding. And he's asking how to answer someone when they question you as a vegetarian. It's like you are in a defensive foot. Oh, why are you vegetarian? You're missing out on a good food and all that. How do we answer them, Sita?
Well, yeah, I mean, I know because a few years ago I went to China and it was very, very foreign, this idea that you're vegetarian. They just didn't understand it at all. The concept just wasn't there. Because, meat and fish and seafood is just so integral to what you eat. So for them, it's just completely alien to say, what is that? What is vegetarianism? But you just have to stand your ground and say, this is what I believe in. This is my tradition. This is what I like to do because I try and avoid hurting or harming animals. And just get by with whatever you can in that particular restaurant or wherever it is. And that's what you can do. In China, we ended up eating loads of rice because there wasn't that much else that we could have. But I think the world is changing. I mean, compared to 10, 20 years ago, where even the idea of being vegetarian was, seen as, very much a minority thing. Now it's changed a lot, like to the point where, vegan stuff is much more trendy. It's much more fashionable to be vegan, and it hopefully encourages more people to go down that route. Vijay Bhai?
So I think I think just be honest about it. I would say, right? Just be honest that, look, this is what I believe in. This is what I stand for. And just explain yourself. I mean, I have been told many times you're missing on really some juicy steaks, right? So be it. I mean, you can't miss something you haven't had, right? So it doesn't really matter. But as Sita said, there are many places in the world, they don't understand the idea of vegetarianism. I was working in Japan many years ago. And when I ordered some, soup, it said vegetable soup, that bits of ham sprinkled in it. I said, no, I can't have this. So I sent it back. They sent me another, then it's empty, mussel shells. There was no shell, just mussel shells, empty. So I said, why did you put this empty shells? So there's no meat, it's just shells, right? I said, no, I can't have this either. He goes, no, but you get the sea flavor. I said, I don't want the sea flavor. But they don't get that idea because they're not, so you can't blame them, right? But I think if you explain in a sincere manner and just stand your ground, then I think don't be ashamed. So this is what I am and this is what I believe in. And that should be it, yeah.
Yes, so there you go, an answer to that question. But yeah, the main question is, if you can't stand the violence to animals, then you become vegetarian. Or there are people who just can't stand that taste even. So there you go. You could just say, I don't like eating that. that doesn't taste nice to me.
Yeah,
That
true.
could be one of the answer. And yeah, it's you can come up with your own personal answer to that. Something hopefully short and sweet, so that gets over the other conversation. We take a next question from NK. He's saying, why is it that even amongst Hindus who eat meat, they tend to not eat beef? Vijay bhai?
Yeah, I think this is a question we have covered quite a few times. Yeah, I think the main thing is that because for Hindus, the entire civilization of Hindus has been in symbiosis with, with the cow, and by extension, the bull and buffalo. So they've been so integral in part of our lives and kind of helped us, to kind of evolve into us and settle down. So just that in a sense enough for us to, show reverence to the cow and the bull in that sense. So basically, and that's why we are very uncomfortable eating something that's kind of stood by you for such a long time. We feel very uncomfortable. That's the main reason. Of course, there are other reasons, religious reasons like Krishna being in love with the cow. By and large, I think it's deep into our psyche because of the symbiosis we have had with the gentle cow. Sita Ben?
Yeah, I mean, Dad often used this example. If you go out and ask an Englishman who's walking his dog, he always call him Rover. Imagine if you wanted to eat Rover, your Englishman would be like, I can't eat a dog. Man's best friend. You can't eat a dog. So for the Hindu, the cow is the man's best friend because it allowed us to settle down, allowed agriculture, allowed us to become civilized. Because before that, we were just running around as hunter-gatherers and moving from one place to another. But having a settled environment to live in allowed us to focus on more higher sort of aspirations, which was so crucial to human development. This idea of doing disciplines like art and music and thinking about spirituality happened because we were able to settle down as communities and villages and all of that. And we have the cow to thank for that, because the cow provided us with milk and a huge variety of resources, allowed us to do agriculture. So we have a great deal to be thankful for the cow. And that's why Hindus just say, it's man's best friend. How can you eat your best friend? There's no way you can.
Wonderful answer. This leads to the next question. That is the nutritional aspect, and would you get enough nutrition from a vegan diet or vegetarian diet? Now, when we think about, cows and milk, we get the protein from that, and that helps being vegetarian. But vegan, they don't even have the milk products and stuff. So is there an issue, health problems? Would it lead to health problems if we avoid even milk and being vegetarian? Are we leading ourselves to some health problems later on, Sita?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, as a child or as a baby, you definitely need milk, and that's why mothers are supposed to be able to provide the milk. And it's just, when I think about it, it's such a strange and abstract idea that we go to the cow for milk. Like, surely humanity makes its own milk. Why do we need to steal it from poor baby cow? So it's a really, really difficult situation. But these days you get all sorts of alternatives, which, we're very lucky to be living in a time where we do get those alternatives. So, the child can get the calcium through, powdered milk or whatever it is, which avoids any kind of cruelty to the cow. And obviously with the vegan diet, all the sort of pulses that you get your protein from there. So all the dars and lentils and mugs, you get all your protein from there. So you can, if you're resourceful and you really think it through once, then you just make it part of your routine and you've got it, really. So it's just a case of making that effort at the beginning to make sure you get your resources right to start with. And we're very lucky to be living in a time where you get all of these products in the supermarket. You don't need to go out foraging for it. It's already there for us. So it's just a case of making that little bit of effort and then incorporating it into our routine. Vijay Bhai's got more experience with that as being vegan.
No, but I think you're right, Sita. I think one thing I must mention, because initially I was vegetarian, and of course the hardest part was give up cheese. cheese and the Indian sweets like the burfis and the pendas and all this, which have a lot of cream and milk or rasmalai. Very tough job giving that up. But I think one thing we have to be careful that when you're a vegan, you have to understand your diet. It's very important to eat enough pulses. For us, it's lucky, in the community I come from, mung beans, khichdi is one of the biggest things we eat. So mung beans, pulses, soy. If you eat all that in the right amounts, then I think you're absolutely fine. But you have to know and watch your diet and make sure you eat the right amount of foods. Then I think you can have a perfect vegan or vegetarian diet. Shouldn't be a problem. So but I mean, it is true that if you look at scientific, that to extract protein from meat is very easy. From plants is a bit more hard work, but you can still get enough protein if you eat the right amount of right type of foods, and so it should be okay. Yeah.
Wonderful answer. We take a next question from Jots for YouTube. He's saying there is also unnecessary fear of vegetable-based alternative that use soy-based ingredients and whole GMO issue. So he's talking about the soy-based ingredient and genetically modified food. What's your thought on that, Vijay?
Okay, this is again a very, very controversial and a complex issue. But I'll tell you my views, and I know a lot of people disagree with me, which is fine. One thing I'll say that the GMO foods, if they're controlled in a controlled manner and there's regulation, then I'm okay with it. I'll tell you why. Because feeding the population, the world population is now, we need to have modern seeds and more, problem that they grow properly resistant to feed the, growing population. A recent example of Sri Lanka is a very good example. Sri Lanka had some advisors, scientists who said, go organic, everything, organic, we don't want anything. And the food production has dropped by nearly 35% on every, and now they're importing, and now they're on the verge of not having enough food. Because some clever person thought, oh, we go ethically. While it's true that we need to preserve the original seed, that's the other thing, you see, because if you go GM and the old seeds are destroyed, that is a bad thing as well, because the original seeds are very important in the sense that sometimes we may need the DNA if for some other reason. So we have to preserve the DNA as well. And luckily there are some seed banks. I know Norway runs the biggest seed bank in the world. They have about 4 million seeds locked in vaults, deep vaults in the mountains and in dry, vacuum environments. So in the future, there's a nuclear war, those seeds will still be available to us. But some of the seeds have evolved for millions of years, right? Through natural, evolution. So the original seeds are very important as well. But even GM, to grow better food, better seeds, to give farmers better income, that also is important. And I know that in the UK, the leading universities like, Cambridge, Oxford, they're all doing GM research in a controlled environment. And when they see, like, I'll give you one very good example, which I was really impressed with. When I went to Cambridge University for talk once, they were showing how plants of aubergine or, some of these plants, the stomata can be controlled in such a way that in dry areas, they close earlier, so to preserve water. These are all GM kind of, plants to try and work in a harsh environment so that they can expand the coverage of some of these plants to feed a growing population. The population is supposed to increase to 9 billion from now, which is about 7. It may go 9, and hopefully this thing after 9, 10, it start coming down again. But we have to feed these people, right? So we have to have the science involved to produce these foods, but in a very, very controlled manner, in such a way that we preserve the old and keep the new. So I'm not a scientist, but I think we have to think very carefully. Soy is very popular now. All kinds of food. I don't like soy food myself personally, but my children love it as a vegan diet. They love soy, alternatives. So soy food is absolutely fine, but it's just beans, right? Nothing wrong with that. Is how but I think because it's processed, some people find it hard. The thing about processed food is this, that we haven't evolved to really have a lot of processed food. We evolved to have hard, seeds crunch and our body to work at it to get the nutrients out. So personally, I would say have less processed food as less as possible, but you can't just rule it out totally because we have to feed the world. So we're all in all a very complex topic. I'm kind of in both camps. I love to say we must keep organic. We also must work on GM to feed the world. Singapore is growing, vertical, plant fields now. They're growing plants on, walls now, yeah, and using cultured water. They're not even using soil anymore. It goes in, culture to feed lettuce. It's already happening. We have huge, warehouses which go skyward, and every floor has got cucumber growing, salad growing, and that's how Singapore feeds vegetables to people. This is modern science, but If it's done in a clever way and a controlled manner, regulated manner, then I'm not going to oppose it. Yeah, Sita, complex issue. What's your view on that?
Yeah, no, very complex. Yeah, it's one of those things. I mean, I personally don't mind genetically modified if it doesn't cause harm to animals or any kind of obvious harm. I don't see anything wrong with it, and in fact, it can really help humanity and maybe even the animals population. So say there's a drought somewhere and you're able to use genetically modified sort of techniques to grow crops or whatever, then you're saving people's lives. You're saving maybe even animal stock lives. So it's a wonderful thing to use. But, with every power comes, with great power comes great responsibility. So we have to do it in a very careful way, make sure that, it's fully sort of regulated and there's enough sort of, safety checks there to make sure that there's no harm caused to people consuming it or to the environment. So yeah, it's one of those things. I think it's a wonderful sort of development that we should use. But as Vijay Bhai said, yes, I love the idea of everything being natural and organic and all of that. But we have to also be prepared for situations where we can't resort to sort of organic and natural foods, and droughts and floods and all sorts of calamities. Make sure that we can still access food resources for humanity and the animal stock. I think that's a wonderful thing.
Wonderful answer. We take a next question, which is kind of related to this lab-based food and stuff, processed food. So the question is, what about meat substitutes engineered in a lab? Is that ethical, since technically no living being was killed? Sitaben, I'm not sure about this meat substitutes. So
yeah, I mean, my husband loves it. He loves it as well, like all these kind of soya, tofu burgers, burgers, soya burgers. And I mean, I personally don't see anything wrong with it, because you're not harming life. As you said, we're not harming anything. And, it's much, much better than killing a cow and making a beef burger. It's much less harmful. So I personally don't see anything wrong with it. And I think it's a wonderful development for humanity. And in fact, it's a really good sort of stepping stone for meat eaters, because my husband used to be a meat eater. And, about 20 odd years ago, he started going on to all this soya-based stuff, tofu-based stuff. And that helped him sort of make the transition away from meat, because it's kind of, apparently it's got the same kind of texture as meat, the same kind of taste as meat. So, for some people, like, that could be brilliant, because then they don't miss that taste of meat that they're craving. They can hopefully get it through these kind of substitutes. So I think it's a wonderful thing if we can sort of edge people more towards less animal consumption, really. Vijay Bhai? Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
I'm personally all for lab engineered meat. I mean, it saves hundreds of acres of land where you have to farm cattle. It's perfect. I think that's a good idea. And I think one thing you have to keep in mind is that to change somebody's diet overnight is not an easy thing. So this is a very good stepping stone to have. And from what I've heard, people who have had this lab engineered, burgers, they can't see the difference in taste at all. So I think it's a wonderful thing in that sense. Yeah. It's happening. So I'm all for that lab engineered meat. I know it's not organic, whatever, but in this case, I'll support it because it's got huge environmental benefits. Yeah.
Plus, it supports the Ahimsa concept, I suppose. So nothing wrong with that. We take a next question. Colin Moffat is asking how to de-escalate confrontation with work colleagues.
Okay, I mean, I've worked in large offices, and I have seen this kind of conflict sometimes. But I think one thing is to make sure that not to make a big thing out of this confrontation, because sometimes somebody challenges you or something bad happens. I think by and large, most companies have processes in place. But the question is, how big do you take it? If your ego comes in the way and you feel, oh, I am insulted, I can't take this, I have to get back, then things can get bad. The question is in the scheme of things, is it really that important? That's how I judge myself. And I try to see that, okay, and human beings are, although they're divine, in the Jivatman form, they have, we all have limitations, we all have issues. That happens. The question is how big you make them. And I try to, even in the most crudest thing or most rudest thing, I try to push at something very trivial, and then it works for me. But yeah, I mean, I know this is a big issue because a lot of companies have got very elaborate policies in place. I think we got, in the company I work with, about 80, 90 pages of how to treat others, how to tackle disputes, whatever is a big thing. But I would just say that try and not make it a big, try and make it smaller than it is. Then I think it goes. Sita, man?
Yeah, it's very difficult dealing with all this kind of office politics and all of that. And I probably think it's worse in bigger corporations, where there's sort of all sorts of bureaucracy and stuff to deal with. It is really tough, but you just have to sort of to have a balance. So make sure you stand your ground and make sure you're not being pushed around, but at the same time, don't go out there causing conflict. When there's a small issue, as Vijay said, just let it go, because ultimately you're just interacting with the spirit. And in whatever environment it is, in work or in home or wherever it is, we just have to sort of try and take the bigger picture in mind, and try and remember that our peace of mind is incredibly important as well. So trying to sort of having that playing over and over in your mind is not helping you, and it makes no difference to the other person. So it's best to just let it go, as Elsa says in Frozen.
Wonderful answer. We take a further question regarding the lab engineering, engineered meat. Nisit Bhai says it's not soya or tofu based thing. It's the question was about growing living meat in the lab through tech, like some companies do. So some companies have a lab and they are growing living meat. Now, question arises, how do you grow living meat without having a life in it? So it's an interesting concept. And what is your thoughts on that, Vijay?
Okay, I mean, I've done a lot of reading on this stuff. What they do is they take living cells from an animal and they grow it basically in petri dishes, in vials, and they grow and they give it culture, that culture, sugar, whatever, and the cells just increase. They just replicate. It's like in a human life or in any living organism, in a plant, the cells replicate. And if it's a control process and you feed the culture in such a way, the cells replicate. So you're not killing a life. You're taking some cells off that animal. So basically, one cow with just scraping some cells off can grow a lot of meat, because ultimately that's how the cow is working, or humans are working, right? When you eat food, it becomes a chemical process, and it's energy, energy to feed our cells, which replicate. So same thing is now done in a controlled environment in a lab. That's how this meat is grown, but then there's no animal in this case. So I think it's perfectly fine, because don't forget, there've been so many hundreds of trials have taken place to try and get the right texture and the cells to grow in the right way, and to get the right color, everything. And now they're on the verge of perfect. This has been going on for really 15, 20 years. And now science has moved so much ahead, they're actually perfecting this. By the way, from what I heard in America, the NASA, they're already looking at this as the food source for people who travel in space. So they're already planning, this technology is already being thought of as take some, big crates of culture material, like, sugar and whatever you need to feed the culture, right? And to chemicals, and then just pump them in and put some sense, and voila, you have food growing in your journey. So there are already tremendous ideas coming out from these, not just replicating the cattle, but also for human exploration is coming up an idea. So I think personally, it's a very good thing, because the meat they grow in the wild is pretty much the same process as an animal. Okay, not as perfect as the animal, because animals evolved over 1 million years, but still a very good idea, which humans are trying to replicate. I think by and large in the future, we might be living in an environment like, the Star Trek. We tell the machine, make some coffee, and the coffee is just made for you. Make some, I want an apple just comes up. So ultimately, there are elements, right? There's normal elements. So someday humans will master this, how to make from natural elements, and skip the whole process of growing a plant and just make the plant, the food itself, right? We will be there at some point. So ultimately, it's just elements. And so personally, I think that growing of lab meat, I'm all for it, because it's saves on environment, creates a viable food source. Even the poor countries can grow it. You don't need a nice green field anymore to grow that food. Yeah. So many, many benefits. Yeah. Sita?
I think I completely agree with that. If it doesn't involve harming animal life, then I don't see anything wrong with it. And you're doing it in a completely controlled environment. And, we mass produce so many, different products and things. This is just another sort of substitute that people can have, which hasn't involved any kind of suffering to the animal kingdom. So I think it's a wonderful thing. And, if it can help people to sort of continue living in an ethical way without having to slaughter loads of animals for their diet, then it's a wonderful thing. I don't have anything more to say.
Interesting answer. So we got a next question, which is kind of related to it. It's saying, Ian Pridew is saying, is there a connection between pain the animals feel when killed and the consumer who eats the animal? Does that have a spiritual effect? Sitabin?
There are sort of, there is the sort of thinking that, the way food is prepared, if you're doing it in a loving way, it can have some kind of a positive impact on the person who's eating it. So, but I think possibly yes. If the animal is sort of, gone through a great deal of suffering before they're killed, maybe it does have an effect. There's no sort of I don't think there's any scientific way of measuring that, but you would personally, if you know that animal has suffered a great deal and then you're eating it for your pleasure or your consumption, surely that would make you feel terrible, right? So if you can sort of manage to have a diet which doesn't involve that kind of suffering, if you're able to just do it with the plants and make sure the food is prepared lovingly, I'm sure that makes a difference. That's why I'm sure that's why they rave about their mother's cooking, because it's prepared in such a loving way that it probably does have some kind of a psychological impact on that person. And we do have these kinds of tamasic foods, rajasic foods, sattvic foods. We do have that in Hindu thinking. So, focusing on less sort of heavy, stodgy foods and focusing on lighter, more nutritious food is much better for us. So there's lots of different layers to it. I don't know too much about it. I don't know if Vijay can help with that.
No, I think Sita, you're right. That's I have the same understanding as well. I think by and large, a lot of scriptures mention that, again, how animal food has been sourced impacts the consumer as well. So I guess in essence, there is some truth in that, in the sense that if animal is going through tremendous pain, then even the thought that it has gone through pain can also have an effect on us. That's all I can add to that. Yeah.
Wonderful answer. Over to Vijay Bhai. Nisit Bhai.
Wonderful, folks. Where has the time gone? We're almost at 1 hour into the broadcast, and it is that time where we need to wrap up the call for today. So normally what would happen is we have a focus topic that would be maybe 20 minutes into the call, then we'd go into general Q&A. But today the topic has really been interesting, and so we've had these questions all the way through, almost till the very end. So before we close for the day, I just want to share a couple of our resources. For those of you, and I know there are a number of new people who've joined the broadcast today, so welcome once again. Please do consider going to our Basics of Hinduism course. Finally, I'm getting to my goal of getting to 8,000 people here, so then we can move on. Next will be 10,000 from there. But it's a great course. Consider enrolling in it. And how would you find it? Well, you can go to our website, which is hindu-academy.com. And over here, you'll find the course link. And if you need to reach out to me, you can reach out to me here for any technical issues. You can also download the Hinduism ebooks that we've got over here. And of course, we've got our social media channels, where I would encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, where we've got, I think, about 105,000 subscribers now, roughly. And we have over 3,000 videos. Some are organized into playlists, so you can enjoy them. They're all neatly laid out for you. And we always like to end with a quote from Swami Vivekananda. And I think this one is a good one for the kind of times we are living in at the moment. People are facing challenges in many aspects of life. But if you're one who's able to take risks, then you will definitely either win, in which case you will be a leader. And if you lose, then you can be a guide. But there is no lose. So that's it. Take risks in life. You win, you can lead. If you lose, you can guide. And that's a great way to look at things in life. So before I close, I'd just like to say thank you. Manish Bhai, you've got a couple of people who've given you a shout out saying they missed you while you were away. And thank you again to Vijay Bhai and Sita Ben for answering the questions today. So Manish Bhai, today you are in the full deep end. I didn't step in to help you out at all. How did you find it coming back?
Oh, I think that was all fun. I think I missed it as well. So thank you to guys who missed me, and hopefully I can continue to contribute, and we can have these wonderful conversations.
Absolutely. So is there any final words from anybody, or shall I just wrap up now? Okay, everybody, bye-bye for now. We will see you next week, 2 o'clock UK time as usual.